Beth Hammack is the co-head, recently was the co-head of global financing at Goldman Sachs. And she will be joining the Cleveland Fed as president in August, and she will be a voter this year. So it should be interesting. The Cleveland Fed has been kind of a leader among the 12 Fed banks in diversity. The first woman ever to head a Fed bank was at the Cleveland Fed. This is the fourth woman following, she replaces Loretta Mester, who was very much a force to be reckoned with on the Fed, and generally viewed as moderately hawkish. So we don't really know how Hammack is going to be, but it's also of note, and this will probably cause some discussion, possibly even by Congress. But this will be the third significant Fed hire from Wall Street. I mean, the St. Louis Fed just hired someone who from a hedge fund background. And of course, Neil Kashkari at one point worked at PIMCO. So it's interesting. The Fed obviously cares a lot about transmission of monetary policy, and understanding the nuts and bolts of Wall Street, and regulation is really important. So this is a kind of a deep Wall Street background and understanding that she'll bring to the job.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about her resume, because not only Goldman, but she was also part of TBAC, right? The Treasury. What's my acronym here on this one? But I know that because I interviewed her talking about that. The Treasury Borrowing Advisory Committee? What is that? Like, how did she play a role in that?
That's right. I mean, it's essentially kind of a committee that deals with the Treasury Department and advising them. And she led that committee, and she was considered at Goldman as a leading candidate to be chief financial officer. She didn't get that job a few years ago, but she's had like a ton of different high-ranking positions at Goldman. And certainly her experience dealing with regulators and understanding the regulatory background, that's going to be helpful at the Fed, which is a big bank regulator, including of Goldman.
Steve,
although she presumably would not be involved.
Right.
That's done by the New York Fed.
It just enlighten me, Steve. Is there any approval process here for this appointment, or is it no?
There is. I mean, the way the process works, they started a search, a nationwide search last November. It involved the 6 directors, other than the bankers. The bankers on the who are directors of the Cleveland Fed are not involved. And then after they select a candidate, that candidate then has to be interviewed by the Board of Governors. And right now, Chris Waller is the governor who used to work for the St. Louis Fed and was appointed by Trump. He kind of leads the effort to screen presidents, but the board will vote on them, and they have to be approved by the Fed's Board of Directors, Board of Governors.
We've interviewed her on TV before when she was still at Goldman. She's such a firecracker. She's only 52.
Right.
Such a firecracker.
Right.
Walk us through sort of the District of Cleveland, like not the actual city, but in terms of the Fed, like how is that region doing?
The Cleveland region has always been kind of, I mean, it's a Rust Belt region. Ohio, it's not one of the, each of the 12 regions are different, but this is a region that's more suffering and more struggling. And there are a lot of issues like with education and with not having the best jobs, and so it's a tough district.
Steve, I mean, she's a Wall Streeter, as you mentioned before, and there's been a couple of those in the past. Does that get pushed back anywhere? I mean, but I'm not sure who you would rather have than somebody from financial services at a Federal Reserve job, but where do they typically come from?
There has been some pushback. I mean, there are groups that are kind of more some of the liberal think tanks, and I think Elizabeth Warren has occasionally weighed in, the senator, in opposition of there being too many, Goldman and Wall Street alums. I mean, there have been quite a few. The former head of the New York Fed was a Goldman economist, and Robert Kaplan, who was with the Dallas Fed, was a Goldman, alum. So it's like sometimes there has been criticism that the Fed is like too close to Wall Street, but as you say, I mean that the flip side is you really need to understand the nuts and bolts if you're going to regulate it, if you're going to understand monetary policy transmission and all the ins and outs of QE and QT and those kind of things.